Hey everyone, this is Mark Metternich. I'm on a probably 5 to 7 day road trip on the East Coast, scouting out scenic locations that are within reach from where I live, and we are having a blast. But we're taking one rest day here at an Airbnb, and I've been getting so many questions about our printing workshop, the Ultimate Mastering Fine Art Printmaking Workshop with Robert Park of Nevada Art Printers and myself. And I want to knock down just a couple of these questions, particularly pertaining to sharpening. I just woke up, so if it sounds like it, that's why. This is not a professional video. I'm just using my MacBook Pro. I just feel like this is something I want to address a little bit. But I keep getting all kinds of questions about upsizing algorithms, sharpening methods, grain simulation, custom ICC profile spaces to be used as your working space instead of ProPhoto. Why not ProPhoto? All kinds of things like this. I just want to tell you that we do still have openings for our workshop on July 21st and 22nd, and I have more pride about this workshop than any workshop I've ever done before. People are leaving this workshop with every single tool and piece of knowledge that they will need, even for years to come, to absolutely master, from opening up a raw file all the way to a masterpiece, perfected fine art print. That does not mean that everybody has to employ all of the things that we're teaching, because not everybody is a fine art printmaker. Some people need to whittle it down a little bit so that their workflow is faster and more production oriented. But we're giving you everything there is to know. In fact, I believe that there is not a print workshop on the market like what we are offering people. And at its price, and it being in a lab and being able to make prints and being able to go see world-class prints and the inspiration, the camaraderie and everything, I believe there's just nothing like it. It's probably going to be about 2 10-hour days, Saturday and Sunday, July 21st and 22nd. If you're interested, check out the links that I put all over Facebook. They're on my website. Just look up my name, Mark Metternich. You can find my website, go to workshops, click on the link, and you'll see the link about that workshop. So I want to talk about sharpening here. But before I say that, I want to say one more thing. People are asking, well, what's the curriculum of the workshop? We are not giving out the specific curriculum because the stuff is copyrighted. It has to be protected. But I will tell you that this is the most cutting edge knowledge in the industry today, and there's nothing that we are not going to be addressing. No question left unanswered, and absolutely no stone left unturned. So the curriculum is absolutely exhaustive, for bare beginners all the way up to advanced pros who may even have their own lab. We had both in our last workshop, and I asked both of them if they benefited, and they said tremendously. Sharpening. Let me tell you a little bit about two kind of general sharpening machines or algorithms. We have Unsharp mask. It's just a name that comes from the film days, but there's a lot of sharpening that may not say Unsharp mask, but it's based on Unsharp mask. Unsharp mask, what it tries to do is detect edges, and it does. It does an incredible job. It detects edges wherever there are things that transition. And at a micro level, depending on the radius that you choose, the smaller the radius, the more micro, and the larger the radius, the less micro it is. What it's trying to do is it's trying to add contrast at edges. So if you have something white next to something that's black, or something that's, dark next to something that's light, as you see here, this is a rock face in Yosemite. We zoom away, you start seeing what it actually is. But when we come up on the pixels, you start seeing what's actually going on here. So let me give you an example here. I just threw a little bit of Unsharp mask on this one, and let me put it in normal mode, so you will see that Unsharp mask will also create color shifting. Do you see the intensifying of colors radically at the micro level? So these blues are getting nuclear blue, these are getting red. So it's very important to use Unsharp Mask in luminosity mode so that the colors aren't changing, just the tonalities. Now, you can see pretty darn clearly that it's adding contrast. Basically what it does is if you draw out a document that's pure white and then you make the other half pure black and then you have a little bit of a feather zone, but it can't be pure black and pure white because black can't get blacker, white can't get whiter. You have to lower the contrast of the blacks and the whites to do this test. But what you'll see is if you blur it just a little bit, there'll be a transition zone. Like let's say you'd have black on one side and white on another side. I'll just show you. Okay, so here's a document. I just created a dark side and a light side. As you can see, at 600%, we're almost seeing the pixels. We'll be at 12,800%. Obviously, there's no transition zone. Those are pixels right there. That's 1 pixel, 1 pixel, 1 pixel, 1 pixel. Now, what lens blur is blur because the light has to go through glass and then hit the sensor. That's why better glass, cleaner glass, sharper glass, Leica lenses, Zeiss lenses, etc. What they will have is they will have less of this going on at edges because we're dealing with pixels. Okay, so this would be an edge, kind of a typical edge blur. I would say for a 46 megapixel camera that I'm shooting with, the Sony A7R II with a good lens, good f-stop. When I zoom up on a horizon line, so I could flip this if I wanted to, and there'd be color involved too, you're going to see about a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6-ish pixel feather no matter how sharp your lens is once you get up to the actual pixels. And why do we actually have this feather zone? It's because this is the blur that is in the image. That's what it is. So light comes through the glass and then hits the sensor, and these are millions of little mini photosites, and they're picking up light, and they're picking up different amounts of light. A cleaner glass image, a better lens image, what you're going to see is this. Around every little edge, every little rock, every little stick, every little twig, you're going to see less and less and less of this to a point. So like your super crazy sharp lenses might be like this and shot at the best f-stops, maybe like that, where a softer lens is going to be more like this. That's a lot of blur that's going on. That's what blur is. Blur is these transition zones that should be sharp next to each other when zoomed way up. Okay, so that gives you an idea. Now let me talk about Unsharp Mask and Deconvolution Sharpening, which are totally different types of sharpening that should be used at totally different stages of your sharpening protocol. The deconvolution is designed to deconvolute. It's designed to undo the natural softness that's inherent in a raw file. There's a couple of reasons why raw files are soft, but one of them is just your lens, and another one is just how raw files interpret data. And what deconvolution has been basically designed to do in our industry of photography is to deconvolute this blur. So it's basically designed to a limited extent, undo the blur. Unsharp Mask is a completely different concept. Unsharp Mask gives us the perfect illusion of more detail, but it's actually fooling us by creating more contrast at edges. It's very different. It's very hard to get perfect testing out of this, so I'm not going to use a graphic because you're not going to get the exact testing out of it. But let me back off and show you. See, when you back off, now we're down to 700%, 600%, 5, 4, 3, 2, 100% viewing distance is right here. You see just a little bit of blur on that edge. So there'd be just a little bit of blur on the entire image. I'm going to zoom up one more time just to tell you a little bit about deconvolution, not to get too into it. And this is very much basic understanding of it. It's a science. But contrast tries to find edges, and it does a very good job at finding edges. In fact, Photoshop's got various algorithms for edge detection. And then what it tries to do is it's thinking, okay, it doesn't think this, but this is how it works. This is a darker rock. Forget about color. We don't have color here. But let's say this was a dark, almost blackish rock, and this was some light sand, okay? And we're zooming up on the very, very edge of it. What it's going to do is it's going to try to determine where the middle of this transition zone is. Okay, so maybe this is the middle right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So right here might be the middle. And what that algorithm, is amazing what these things do. What it's going to try to do is it's going to try to basically darken this stuff. And how wide of a radius you use while you're sharpening, just ignore this Gaussian blur right now, will determine how far out. It could go way, 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 way out. These pixels will get darkened. That's the basic gist of it. And then on this side, it's going to try to lighten these pixels. And it's kind of a blunt way that it does it, but it lightens these pixels lighter and lighter. And if you use a really tight radius, it's not going to go out very far. If you use a wide radius, it's going to go way, 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 way out. That's what it's trying to do. And for whatever reason that I don't 100% understand, I understand pretty good, it creates, when you get back here, it creates the illusion of more detail around fine, small things. Deconvolution, on the other hand, is kind of like the word suggests. It's trying to deconvolute. So let's say this is convolution. This is convoluted here. This is solid. This is solid. What it's actually going to try to do is it's going to try to lighten this row more than it lightens this row, more than it lightens this row, and then not lighten this row at all. So what does that mean? Lighten this row a little bit. If you lighten this row a little bit more, you lighten this row a little bit more, and then here's the edge, and it does the opposite on this side. Darkens this row more, darkens this one less, darkens this one less, doesn't do this one. It's actually trying to, I can show you kind of an example. This is if it worked perfectly. So if it worked perfectly, what it's trying to do is this, and this is not adding contrast. Watch this. See, it's lightening those rows on the right, lightening those rows on the right, darkening the ones on the left, and at some point you have a hard, perfect edge. Now deconvolution cannot work that perfectly, but that's what it's trying to basically do. It's trying to lighten these and darken these in a way to where it's deconvoluting that edge and it's making it look sharper. Let's zoom out just a little bit here and show you the difference. So there's a blur zone, and watch when those pixels are getting tighter, 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 tighter to complete tightness. So that's how that works. That does not work well on enlargements because especially you're dealing with big, huge transition zones. Where it works its best is at the raw stage, or even better on a TIFF or a PSD. Why do I say even better? Because most people who sharpen their raw files, I'm talking into the 99%, 90%, 95% of people are doing it. They're doing it in a way that is creating artifacting that cannot be removed from your original file unless you go all the way back to raw again. So in other words, in the raw converter like Lightroom or Camera Raw or whatever you use, if you're using the sharpening tab, you're creating an artifacting into the image that cannot later be removed as a TIFF or a PSD. It's going to be in there, and it'll limit how big you can size these things up and how good the detail will look. So it's better to not sharpen in the raw converter and to do it in Photoshop on a layer on your master file before you end up sizing up and making your image, because you just don't want to do it wrong. If you do it wrong, you always want to have your master file, your TIFF or your PSD, that doesn't have it in it. So that opens up a whole can of worms. I'm not going to talk about that. But what I want to show you here is here's a little bit of Unsharp mask thrown onto this approximately 40 megapixel image of a mountain, and these are the rocks on the side of the mountain. And you can see the massive contrast being added to it. And you can see that in normal mode, look at that. Look at the difference. How much of a color boost. It's blasting colors. So you're getting basically color artifacting in your image at a micro level. So you got to be really careful with that. You may not see that on a small print, but you can start seeing that on large print. So I would always sharpen in luminosity. Or for those who go into LAB mode, which most people wrongly call lab, that will also produce good results in terms of keeping your colors from changing. Very, very similar results as Photoshop. So there's your bit of Unsharp mask. So now let's go to deconvolution. This is deconvolution being added to the image. And as you can see, all this contrast that you see popping out here is not happening on that one. That's contrast at a very micro level, where this is almost the same amount of sharpening, maybe just a hair less, but you can see what it's trying to do is, like, watch this zone right here. Like right here, there's a zone from probably here all the way up to here. It's trying to lessen those zones. Now, it doesn't do it perfectly, like I said, but when you study images at 1,000%, 2,000%, 6,000%, etc., you start getting a bit savvy on what you're seeing when you're seeing actual real detail versus an artifacting that's trying to produce the look of more detail, but it's not actually more detail. It's artifacting. It's actually damaging the image to a certain extent. If it looks better, it looks better. That's a fact. But I just want you to know this is actually very, very, very similar looking to if you shot an image with a less lens and then a higher quality lens. It has that same look to it. It's very, very similar. And when I do it this way with the Unsharp mask, that is not what you see when you're looking at a better lens. Just want to get your minds around that just a little bit. So basically, when we use a little bit of deconvolution sharpening very carefully on the right monitor, it cannot be a 4 or 5K monitor, and also when we do it very carefully to certain areas of an image that have more detail, not skies, not smooth water effects. And then the fact is most photos have a combination of different kinds of detail. Really detailed detail, that's called high frequency detail. Low frequency detail that has barely any detail in it at all. And then stuff in the middle zone. So you can't just slap on one type of a sharpening on an image to meet all of the needs within the image. And that's what almost everybody does. So in some areas, yes, it may benefit it, but in other areas, it's actually damaging it. What we need to do is get the appropriate sharpening into the appropriate areas of the image, which requires manual masking. Now I've just dropped off 25% of people are listening to this. They're like, I'm never going to do that. Well, that's fine, if you want fast workflows. But if you want the ultimate real detail in your images, you will learn to use deconvolution sharpening on your master file just before you size it up. All you have to do is have it saved as a PSD or a TIFF, certainly 16 bits, and you can, just before you make, let's say, a 40-inch print or something like that, you can create a layer, you can do some deconvolution through the camera raw filter in Photoshop, and then you can mask it in and out of the areas that need it less and need it more. So manual, careful masking. Here's a key. At 100% viewing distance, you should see absolutely no artifacting at all whatsoever. Period. End of story. You can't do it on MacBook Pros. They do not show you real pixels at the appropriate viewing distances. You're actually not seeing the real pixels, and that's a long story. You have to be on an appropriate monitor, and in our class we recommend about 5 different kinds or brands of monitors that are not 4K and not 5K, because those also do not allow you to see this at the level you need to be able to see it. And then when you do that, what do you have? You have an image that basically is like you shot it with a sharper lens before you size it up. So that is really, really important. But it's really fun if you're interested in sort of nerding out and seeing what's actually happening to these images. That's the Unsharp mask. This is the deconvolution. And by the way, this deconvolution, which was run through the Camera Raw filter, has no color boosting going on. So it already has it built in, that luminosity mode, which is really cool. I put this in luminosity mode, as you can see right here, and you'll see no color shifting at all. Nothing changed. Put it in normal mode, nothing changed. So it's already built in. Now, if you really want to get into all of this, my ultimate sharpening workflow for fine art printing is out. It has about 95% of these basics, but it's going to be revised with some new stuff that is absolutely cutting edge and very, very exciting, and very, very important to know about this new era of sharpening that we're coming into for the ultimate detail and quality in our enlargements. If all you're making is web images, who cares? Don't worry about it. But if you're really into pristine files and you want to make impeccable, beautiful, the most detailed prints you possibly can make, then watch out for that when that comes out. That'll probably come out in a couple of months. I got a long ways to go on it. There's so much more information to throw in there. And also maybe consider doing our workshop. Even though the workshop is $14.95 for 2 10-hour days, we give you everything you will ever need in terms of every single step in the long chain of post-processing workflow to absolutely master all of these processes. And lastly, I just want to tell you, we have gone to painstaking lengths to make sure that we are showing you the absolute best of the best of the best. There is all kinds of almost nothing but false information out there about a lot of this. What's the best upsizing algorithm? People will say, oh, it's this, or it's this, or it's this, and a lot of it is driven by marketing. We have tested this stuff out. We are in touch with engineers behind the companies, and we know a lot about how these algorithms are actually being made. Robert Park is an engineer by trade and an artist and a photographer, and has worked with the biggest names in the entire industry. And I believe him untouchable in his knowledge of everything photography, down to the scientific aspect of it. I do unbelievable amounts of testing on things to double check to see what's really going on. And if some of you guys have seen my video on YouTube where I'm showing you what is the actual best upsizing algorithm in the world, it's an eye-opener about these ones that are purported to be the best, but actually they're horrendous because they're adding sharpening as they're upsizing. It's not real detail. There is an algorithm that's the absolute best, and it adds no sharpening at all. It just retains more detail as it upsizes. Anyways, that's it. Just want to tell you a little bit of nerdy, geeky stuff about sharpening. And one last thing, a lot of people are asking about Photoshop Raw Smart Objects. My video is coming out probably in about a week. It's going to be called Photoshop Raw Smart Objects Basics for nature photographers. And basically what it is when you're working in RAW, Lightroom, or Camera Raw, or another converter, but I am a Adobe advocate, you are working on a virtual image that does not exist. You are working with the actual original 32-bit floating data and you're deciding exactly where that's going to be interpreted. What kind of gamma curve, what kind of white point, what kind of everything. And then once you get it as best as possible and you save it or you import it into Photoshop, then that's where it becomes a 16-bit TIFF or PSD or even a large Photoshop file or whatever you use. But now we're not limited to only working in the raw converter. We can get the image as best as possible in the raw converter and import into Photoshop as a smart object, not just a smart object, but a raw smart object. And that's the difference. And we can continue and use many powerful finesse tools in Photoshop to further the image along, but still be in 32-bit lossless RAW. And once we've exhausted those tools, we can then flatten or rasterize. That means turn it into actual pixels, a TIFF, PSD, or whatever, and then we can do our finishing touches. But the key is we're now able to further our workflow far down the workflow chain toward completion, but be in a completely lossless space rather than doing damage to the image every time we adjust it, working in 16-bit or even 8-bit. That's the basic gist. Is it overkill having 32 bits? No, it isn't. In the real world, especially in fine art print enlargements, it is incredible what we are now seeing. Improved tonality, improved color variation and integrity. You have to see Robert Park's 106-inch image at the Carnevale Gallery in Caesar's Palace. It's incredible. It's 106 inches long, and you can put your nose to the print with your best glasses on, and it looks like at least 8x10 quality. And it was shot with the Nikon D810. And he has another shot next to it on the left that's 80 inches. And they're impeccable. So printers who are actually printing, and then really extremely carefully looking at the results, they are starting to see this improvement of this 32-bit workflow being pushed forward in our workflow chain. All right, that's it. Hopefully that didn't blow up your brain. For some of you, I know that'll be like, oh, I already know that. Maybe some of you are like, I don't even know what he's talking about. But hopefully that teaches you a little bit. Bottom line, deconvolution sharpening is a totally different approach to sharpening, and it is best to be used at the pre-size up stage, generally speaking, and it's a very fine sharpening, and it's not even really sharpening as it is more of a deconvoluting of your image so that your image actually has more real detail in it before you size it up. Combine that with the absolute best upsizing algorithms and then the absolute best sharpening protocol, which is a science, and we teach this in our workshop. It's incredible. And then on top of that, maybe a touch of grain simulation only to produce the perfect illusion of more quality detail in the image. And then you have some of the best techniques in the world for creating enlargements. All right, all the best to you. Check out my website. I always have everything there. All my new video tutorials, all of my workshops, everything is there. I always find it funny when people say, well, how can I find out about your workshops? Or how can I find out about your video tutorials? Well, I think every photographer on the planet has a website today. Punch in my name, Mark Metternich, boom, you'll be there. There's workshops, video tutorials. I teach Skype one-on-one lessons. I teach all of this stuff to people privately one-on-one at an hourly rate. I love teaching this, and I love even more than that when my clients tell me, wow, that changed everything. My prints are so much better. Thank you so much. I love it when I really am able to help others. All the best to you and yours, and great light to you.